Moody, as always, it's great to see you, and thanks for giving us a bit of time to come and have a chat about what you're doing. Let me start with a question that relates to being the CEO of a business that is going global. I mean, that's a tough gig. It's a tough game. That. What is it that keeps you motivated? That gets you out of bed in the morning, willing to ride the roller coaster that is building a business. I mean, give us what is it that gets you going?
Yeah, so Paul, first of all, thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to speak, and that's a really great way to start. And what gets me going really simply comes down to the mission of Ripe Labs and what we're all about, which is to put an end to food waste. So the fact that we're working on a problem that's literally affecting every single person on the face of this planet is something that's highly motivating and something that really gives us a sense that this is much more than just about coming to work every day and
Yeah, yeah.
punching in and punching out and getting paid. And this is really what gets us going, and it's the same for me as well as the rest of the team.
And in terms of that mission, I mean, that mission really comes across strongly when I've spoken to you in the past. I mean, how do you? I mean, the business is not just about you. Obviously, it's about your team, isn't it? I mean, how do you make sure that? I mean, you get up, you're motivated, you're riding the roller coaster, as I like to say. How do you get your team on board with that? Because I mean, that it's tough. You're the founder, and it's your baby, as it were. I mean, it's tough for other people. How do you get the rest of your team on board with those sorts of things?
Yeah, so it really comes down to hiring the right people. And so one of the things that Steve, my co-founder, and I do in any interview, regardless of how talented or how good of a fit someone is on paper, if we don't hear during the interview process that they want to make a difference, this is more than just about the paycheck. And hear it genuinely. I mean, it's easy to say, but you could always tell if someone is genuine about it or not,
Yeah.
and they usually have a backstory to it. We don't hire them. I mean, and it doesn't matter how talented they are. So it really starts with that. And then there's a couple other factors that we always integrate in our interviews that are very important and have really helped us build a team that's of like-minded individuals. And so the first one related to that first point is attitude. So, are they driven? Are they passionate? Are they collaborative people? Uh, a second one is, are they good, or in fact, are they great listeners? So once again, great listeners usually is a very good indication for someone that is humble, that
Yeah.
is collaborative, um, that likes to work in a team as opposed to someone that likes to do all the talking. And last but not least is a question that's a little atypical that we usually ask, which is, would we work for them? Would we work for that person that
Right.
we're hiring?
Right.
Now it's a little atypical because sometimes if you're hiring like a junior engineer, for example, it's unlikely that, how are you going to think about working for someone that has that little experience? But if they have these first 2 points, a great attitude, they're great listeners, they're passionate about what they're doing, you could see how they're going to develop into a leader that you would one day work for. But if it comes down to someone that, again, great on paper, even, very highly talented, but you just cannot, and you'd love to have him on a team, but you cannot see yourself working for him, that for us is usually a red flag, and we wouldn't bring them on board. So when you factor all these attributes into play when you're looking at hiring someone, you end up building a team of like-minded individuals that's very highly driven and passionate about what they're doing and are ready to take on such a big challenge, especially one in a startup world where, we're very typically, in most cases, shorthanded and very lean
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have to wear multiple hats and carry a big load.
Yeah. And in terms of your role with that, I mean, what you're saying to me is you make a lot of effort to recruit the right people. Seems to me to be a very sensible way forward. What about your role? How do you work out the things that you can do and only you can do and that you have to do as the CEO to move the business forward and the stuff that other people need to do for you or with you. I mean, how do you work out that? Because if you don't get that right, you end up trying to do everything. I mean, I often say, in small businesses, it's not chief executive officer, it's chief everything officer. But there are huge dangers of trying to do everything, aren't there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, the first and foremost, you really have to understand what your role is
Hmm.
as a CEO, right? And again, it comes down to three things. The first one is really setting the mission and the vision for the company, right? Building a very highly capable team around that mission. And so right then and there, you start looking at all the different things that either the skills that you lack, or even if you have these skills, but you just don't have the capacity to work in those areas because of the third point that I'm about to mention, that you bring the right people in for the right roles and the right positions to achieve that mission. And then the third is setting them up for success,
Right.
right? So you set them up for success by once again building the right team of like-minded individuals that are collaborative. Of course, fundraising, right? That's a huge part of the role because you need to bring in money and in order to give the team the tools necessary to
Yeah.
be able to achieve what they're going to achieve. And so by really defining your role as a CEO up front, you understand where you need to play and where you need to focus. And then you also recognize, okay, what are the other gaps that I need to fill in?
Hmm.
And one of the things that I was very fortunate with is that I have a great co-founder and business partner in Steve. And Steve and I have been working together now on and off first in big companies and then eventually in startups and then consulting and now running this startup together since 2011. So we've been working together for
Right.
quite a while
Yeah. Yeah.
and finding a counterpart, a partner that complements your core skill sets at the leadership level is absolutely key because you won't be able to do it all by yourself. And that's something that I think is quite unique about Steve and I's relationship and has really led to the success that Ripe Labs has achieved to date.
Yeah, and one of the things that interests me about the situation when you've got a relatively small team but you're trying to achieve quite big things is this idea that of the kind of collective intelligence. It's the idea that the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and how you build a team that really enables you to move the business forward. I mean, what's your take on that? Those sorts of issues.
Um, yeah, I think or I don't even think I've seen it firsthand at how this is absolutely essential to succeed and go against all odds. I mean, the statistics are very well known out there for startups, right? Over 95% of startups are going to fail.
Yeah,
So the odds are against you. The odds are definitely stacked against you. And we learned firsthand that you could have a great product, great technology, a great market opportunity, and yet still the company goes nowhere and the company fail. And we see that every single day,
right.
right? And there are several reasons. Timing is a big one. Sometimes you could have the best product in the world, the timing is just not right. But another big one is management and the team, just not having the right team on
Yeah,
board.
yeah,
And then I would extend that even beyond the team to other stakeholders, investors, strategic partners, even
yeah,
customers. You have to pick the right customers. And what will facilitate all that, really, Paul, is it all comes back to the mission and the purpose of the company,
yeah,
right? So just having a very clear mission and purpose, you will end up attracting like-minded individuals, whether it's you're talking about team members or even if you're talking about investors and strategic partners that are gonna, of course, help to the point that you're also, I'm sure, gonna touch on, which the being such a small team and trying to expand globally, right? You're going to rely on other strategic partners that you have to have a high degree of trust in and a very well aligned mission with.
yeah.
And so all these really do come into play to allow us to be successful and and make it against all the odds.
Yeah. Before I mean, I want to come back to partnerships because it's a really important point you've just made. But before we get to that, let me just ask you, when was the moment, or tell us about the moment when you thought we can take this technology global? I mean, when did that happen? Did that happen when you came up with the idea? I mean, did it happen? Was it something that you learned after a year or two? I mean, when did that moment happen?
Yeah, so I love the question, Paul, because no one ever asked me that question. And the first answer that came to mind is from day one. And
Right.
that's
Okay.
what we loved about it. And in fact, that's what is at the core of our technology and at the core of what really gets us excited and driven to bring this technology to market is from day one, we could see that this is something that can be used truly anywhere in the world, from the largest distributors and growers and retailers in the world down to the smallest smallholder farmer to even an individual going to the grocery store one day. We're not there yet, but one day you could go and you could pick up a pack of our stickers and apply it to your fruit and the shelf life and reduce your waste. And so it was from day one. And yeah, and so this is definitely yeah, probably one of the most exciting things about this technology.
And I know, I mean, food waste is kind of a global problem. So in one sense, if you've got a set of tools and techniques that will help reduce food waste, I mean, you'd want them. You'd want to apply them globally if your goal is to if your mission is to reduce food waste, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you'd still be surprised though at how many technologies come online or how many technologies have been developed that can be used all over the world. Now, nothing against them, not to knock down those technologies. They're still very essential because
Mm,
one of the other things we believe 100% is this is not going to be a monopoly by any means. It's not going to be just one company, one solution that's going to solve the problem. You're going to need to tackle it from many different angles.
sure.
But technologies, and they recognize that as, their a niche hours could really be used for a multitude of use cases and
Yeah.
truly anywhere in the world.
Yeah. And just to pick up that point about multiple players, I mean, one of the other issues is about how you stay ahead of the competition. I mean, you've developed some extraordinarily clever technology. It's very effective at, extending the shelf life of products, fruit particularly, and so on. So it's extraordinarily useful in terms of reducing food waste. But there's other people that want to get in on that game. How do you keep your team and yourself? How do you stay ahead of the competition? How do you build a competitive edge?
Yeah, so it really starts with just always remembering our roots and where we started. So
Mm,
when we first came up with this concept, and really started to look for a team to build around the company and the technology, um, so that we could eventually bring it to market at scale, we approached a lot of you know experts in the field, a lot of
mm,
key opinion leaders and people that we thought would be great fit for this technology and could really help us bring it to market. And you'd be surprised at how many of them looked at what we were trying to do and said, it's impossible. There's no way you guys can do this.
mm.
There's no way you can add these type of formulas on a sticker and extend the shelf life in that manner. But we persevered. We knew it was a big challenge, and we knew we had something there that looked promising and that just needed more work and more perseverance. And so we stayed at it and got it to where it is today. And so by just remembering those roots and we we became who we are today because we took on a task that was seemingly impossible.
Yeah,
By keeping that same mindset, we're going to continue to stay ahead of the curve,
yeah,
by taking on these big challenges and not shying away from them, right? And again, not to keep going back to that, but it ultimately has to do with our mission. And if our mission is to put an end to food waste and to develop a technology that could be used anywhere in the world, that in of itself is forcing us to think outside the box and take on a challenge that is, quite large in size. I mean, if we were just to say, okay, we're just going to limit this to, the US market, we're just going to limit this to the South American market and look at a couple use cases and just develop a technology for that, great, we can make an impact, but it's not going to be at a global scale.
sure.
And so by taking on those big challenges, we may end up starting with our first product that works really well for this market or that market, but we know what our ultimate vision is and where we ultimately want to go. And by always keeping that in the back of our mind, we're always going to stay ahead of the other players out there. Or at least we hope to be
Yeah.
able to.
And the point you make is really important because what you're saying is you can't really develop a competitive advantage if you do things in the easiest way, which is blindingly obvious, actually, that you have to do something difficult because that equips you with the tools and the approach and the technology and everything else that enables you to get ahead of the crowd, which is a really obvious. But I think people often forget that staying ahead of the crowd means you have to do things a bit differently. And often you have to work harder. And I want to just, I mean, one of the things that's interesting is the way your technology works, because it works in a very different way. I mean, just explain for people that aren't familiar with what you do, just briefly how your tech works.
Yeah, so we looked at food waste and recognized that it was happening everywhere
Yeah.
and along the entire supply chain. From the moment you pick that fruit off of the tree, we're talking about fruits and vegetables today. Eventually, we can and we will be able to apply it to other food products, but let's just talk about fruits and vegetables right now. From the moment you pick that fruit off of the tree, all the way down to the consumer, there's waste all along the supply chain at every single point. And it's massive.
Yeah.
Fruits and vegetables, it's about 45 to 50%, which is just mind-boggling. So for every apple or every strawberry you're eating, there's literally one going in the trash.
Yeah. It
It's
is truly
just
extraordinary.
unbelievable. Yeah, yeah. And so we recognize that if we're going to have a meaningful impact, we have to come up with a solution that is very easy to use, can be applied anywhere along that supply chain, and can be adopted by the largest distributors and retailers down to the smallest smallholder farmers and eventually even the individual. One day you could go to the grocery store, pick up one of our stickers and apply it to a food, for example. And so that's what we came up with is we turned to nature. Plants have been producing these natural, volatile, you could call them extracts or essential oils for millions of years to protect themselves, right? So in the room you're sitting right now, Paul, if at the very end there is a lavender plant, you're going to smell it
Yeah.
where you're sitting. So the plant is releasing that scent, right? For many different reasons. But one very important reason is to actually protect itself. It has some protective characteristics because the plant is rooted to the ground. So if something comes and attacks that plant, it can't run away. So it creates this protective barrier around it with that scent that can repel pests, fungi, bacteria, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what our plant physiologists and microbiologists do that's quite unique is they can identify out of the tens of thousands of plant extracts that are out there, which ones are going to be most effective against certain post-harvest diseases that are found on food. So on strawberries, the white fuzzy stuff, botrytis,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can develop a formula that can target that. That's the first step. Then our material scientists and chemical engineers will develop matrices or basically a platform to trap these compounds or these extracts that are volatile by nature and control their release rate. So now we have a formula in our hand that we can apply to almost any surface. And that's where the uniqueness of the technology really starts to shine. So we can actually take that very same formula, apply it to the surface of just a simple sticker.
Mm.
You take the sticker, apply it to a fruit or even a package of the fruit. And essentially what we've done is we've repurposed how plants have been able to protect themselves for millions of years to now extend the shelf life of fresh produce and in most cases prevent it from going into the landfills.
Wow. I mean, that's a genius idea. I mean, one of the things that's, I mean, you're working all over the planet, really. I mean, tell us about the process, I mean, because you're taking a unique technology. It's an extraordinarily clever technology. It's very, very innovative. I mean, most people won't understand how that works. And you're taking it into a range of different jurisdictions, different parts of the world, different countries, Latin America, Africa, whatever. How do you approach that process? You've got a brilliant proposition, but you're going into a world that probably doesn't understand what you do. Although they've all got the same. I mean, the problem is you everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you manage that process of going into new markets?
Yeah. So, great question. And, you know, I'll be completely honest and transparent. We did not get it right from the first time around or even the second or third time. It's, first of all, it's really trying to get to a product that you could put in the hand of the customers as soon as possible, right? That's
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
key elements that we wanted to do right off the bat. And then really listening to the customers and seeing where it is that we need to make tweaks or need to make adjustments to the product, and where the product is being accepted and where it's not. So, for example, one of the very interesting observations we made earlier on is there was a lot of resistance in the United States and in Europe, right? And what we attributed the reason for the resistance to be is that you have a relatively robust cold chain in those regions, right? It's
Okay.
highly developed infrastructures. If you're shipping, let's say, for example, strawberries that are grown in California, you're shipping them to the East Coast in, New York or Washington, D.C., you're not going to have what we call breaks in the cold chain along that transport system. Not that many, right? So even though they're still experiencing a high percentage of losses, they're not as desperate for a
Okay.
technology
Okay.
like this, especially one that they've never seen before. And so, whereas, and that was something that we did earlier on, we tried to go into those markets, saw a lot of resistance, and just, a lot of, yeah, when you do this, we'll think about it. Or maybe if you change this, we'll think about it. And then we go into another market like South America and Central America, right?
Mm.
And we start to see that there's a completely different attitude down there. So
Okay.
they're growing highly valuable exotic fruits that can demand very high prices in the US and in Europe, but now they need to export it. They need to export those fruits. And so by sea, in a lot of cases, because air freight is quite expensive. And so now they're going to spend a long time uh, in shipments. There's definitely going to be breaks in the cold chain because you can be assured that, that container, when it's going through customs, they're not going to put it in a huge refrigerated room. It's going to sit out there on the tarmac in the heat.
Mm.
So there could be potential breaks in the cold chain. And of course, the fact that they can demand higher prices in these other markets. So now you're talking to a customer that's very highly motivated
Yeah.
to export their fruits, and shelf life for them is that much more important and valuable because
Yeah.
it's tested and it's challenged. The shelf life is challenged a lot more in those use cases. So now we have customers that are very open to new innovative ideas, which we were surprised. Of course, in the beginning, you're like, oh, of course, yeah, the US, one of the most developed countries in the world. It's all about technology. They're going to love it. But really, it came down to that, desperation. And we found those customers in South and Central America and then in other regions for other reasons. And so that's how we pivoted and decided to focus, refocus our efforts in different regions. It was really based on just coming down to the simple term of the early adopter. Where are the early adopters for this type
Yeah.
of technology?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that they're often in, I mean, you're not the first person that's talked about those early adopters not being where you expect them to be, which is quite an interesting
Yeah,
facet of this. And there's only one way to find
yeah,
out, and that's to go and talk to people, isn't it? And you'll find out whether they're interested.
exactly, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
One of the things, I mean, you've touched previously on, the importance of building partnerships. You've got partnerships all over the place. I mean, give us a sense of how you do that, because I mean, you've obviously got to work with lots of customers, and there's a whole supply chain. There's a process of getting the fruit from where it's grown to where it's purchased. Give us a sense of how you build partnerships up and down those supply chains and how that whole process works.
Yeah, so just like building a team, you really want to find partners that are also very much mission aligned with you.
Yeah,
Especially as a startup, if you're going to sell a strategic partner, and of course, okay, now we're a startup, we're a small company, limited resources. What's our ideal strategic partner? Big company, lots of resources, lots of reach, right? How are you as a small player, someone that hasn't yet made a name for yourself, going to attract a strategic partner like this to take some risk and take a bet on you and partner with you, right? Well, of course, first by having a great technology. Okay, so we check that box. But what really closes the deal is to be able to sell them more than just an idea.
yeah,
And to be able to sell them on the mission of what we're trying to accomplish. And luckily for us, and this is perhaps where timing comes into place, is over the last decade or so, many companies around the world have started to have started to become a lot more sustainably conscious
yeah,
and environmentally conscious. And that's become a lot more a major part of their mission, internal mission, and their core values. And so finding these partners that truly mean it, because there's a lot of companies out there that just say just to say it, but finding the ones that truly mean it um, allowed us to really be able to um, work with teams that naturally felt like they were an extension of Right Labs, right? They're no longer just salespeople trying to turn a profit. Everyone likes profit. Everybody wants to make money. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. But when you find a strategic partner out there that's a true extension of the team and you feel like they're as much invested in the success of this product as you are, then you know you found the right strategic partner.
Yeah.
Whereas in other scenarios, you may compromise, right? And you may just want to find someone that could give you the biggest reach and sell the technology, to the most people or offer it to the most people and hope that it sells.
Mm.
And luckily for us, we knew from day one that this is not a technology that you could just throw over the fence and have a customer use, right?
Yeah.
You need to build the relationship with the customer. You need to
Yeah.
understand their use case. You need to build a trial that is truly going to show how the technology works. And so you can't just pick any strategic partner or any distributor off the street. And that's why I specifically call them strategic partners and not distributors. Essentially, at their core, when you just look on paper, they're distributors. They're buying your product and distributing it to their customer base. But what we really do is actually find partners because they learn about the product, they live and breathe the technology, and perhaps most importantly, they're willing to learn with you because we're still learning and we're still growing.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to learn with you. And to learn with you, that means they're going to take some risk on customers, right? Because now they need to find the right customer. And for some
Yeah.
customers, they may not work for a variety of reasons. And so all that, again, just goes back to the mission. If you have a very well clearly defined mission that resonates with the counterpart, that is the strategic partner, that's going to be a recipe for success.
Yeah, and it's I mean it's also quite a I mean the other thing that strikes me about what you've just said is quite a complicated process, and it's a process that takes a little bit of time. You can't necessarily do those things overnight, can you?
No, I mean you hit it right on the head, Paul, and that's one of the biggest challenges for this industry, for our company as a startup, and even of course when it comes to fundraising, is this takes time,
Yeah,
and we say this all the time. We say this to our investors, we say this to our partners, we even say to the team internally. This is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When you have the right technology, it's not a matter of if, it's a right of when. It's a matter of when.
yeah,
And unfortunately, for a lot of companies, they burn through the cash. They hit a few road bumps along the way. They didn't manage their cash flow properly. They never get to the when, right? And that's what we want to make sure that we avoid. Because we know the potential of this technology. We know how well it works, but we also know that it takes a long time to build these relationships. And you're also working, we started working, or we chose to start working with fruits and vegetables, and by nature, they're seasonal, right? So you could run a trial,
mm,
with strawberries in Japan during their season that runs from somewhere around, I think, November, December, and ends in about May. And now you have to wait until December or January the following year to pick it up where you left
yeah,
things, right? And so it's not like you could just go year round trying to start one trial after the next. So yeah, there's definitely those complexities.
mm,
And again, this is why if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? And
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
No,
why
that's right.
we chose to do it. So
Yeah, and one of the things that you've sort of touched on that kind of comes with complexity is increased risk. I mean, are there things that keep you awake at night? Given the process you've just outlined. I mean, it's not a simple process, is it? And it's not a quick process. I mean, are there things that
yeah.
keep you awake at night? Are there things that really worry you about that complexity and those issues?
Yeah, I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is just the macroeconomic conditions, that
Yeah,
impact, I mean, right now, of course, tariffs is on the top of everyone's mind, and you'd be
yeah,
surprised at how that can, have completely unexpected consequences, even if you think you have everything lined up. And it was the same thing, when we went through COVID and what happened with the supply chain there, and
yeah,
the availability of some of our raw materials and the costs and whatnot. So those definitely are on the back of our mind, because these are things that are completely out of our control.
yeah,
Things that are more in our control, yet are still very difficult to predict, are just the fact that you don't know what you don't know. And what I mean by that, Paul, is, every time and this is often, one of the things we try to remind ourselves is you achieve a big milestone for the company. Let's say, for example, you get your first successful trial in place and you get amazing results with a customer, right? We oftentimes forget to just take a pause and celebrate, right?
Yeah.
And just recognize how far along we've come to make it to that milestone. But the reason why that happens is because now we're looking at the next milestone and
Yeah.
we're wondering, what is it that we don't know, right? We just tried the product in a container. What happens when we try this in 50 containers, right? All throughout the season. And now you're going to get different customer profiles that are going to be looking at your product and whatnot. So that's definitely something that could weigh heavily
Mm.
on you at night. But I think it's always just important to ground yourself and just remember that there's only so much you can do,
Mm.
and that you just give it your best, and let things play out as they're going to play out. And that's easier said than done, but it's very, very important for people to keep in the back of their mind.
Mm.
I happen to rely on faith a lot. That's what gets me through this. Other people rely on other things. But I've seen it over and over again,
Mm.
and we talk about it all the time. Steve and I, my co-founder, and I talk about it all the time, is if we sit where we are today, we could trace back and connect the dots as to how we got to where we are today. And it's amazing, right? You look at
Mm.
all the different, uh, you know, happenstance things the way that things just had to fall perfectly in place for it to happen in the way that it happened. But if you go back all the way back and you look forward and you think you can plan it out to work out that way, there's no way it's going to happen. I mean, we
Yeah.
had completely different plans for where we wanted to be in 2025 or how we were going to get to where we are today. And it's all happened completely differently. And you just have to, yeah, at some point recognize that there's only so much you can control.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, and that feeling of not being in control. I mean, I certainly understand that. I also think, I mean, the thing that was going through my mind as you were speaking is that that is a big challenge dealing with that uncertainty and not being in control of a lot of stuff, and that it can be quite stressful. I know that. It's also what makes the journey interesting, isn't it? To come back to your point earlier on, if it was easy, everyone would do it, and it's not. But that's also what makes it interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I could not see myself doing anything else other
Mm.
than what I'm doing today because the highs are super high, the lows are low,
Yeah.
but the highs are super high. And when you do achieve some success and when you're able to break through and from one milestone to the next, you've literally you can literally experience, the whole process of
Mm.
going through that. Whereas with big companies and big corporations, and nothing wrong with those at all. I just had a call this morning, a biweekly call with one of my very close friends and former colleagues, one of the smartest people I know, works at a big medical device company. And I tell him this all the time, and I tell my friends that he's probably one of the most smartest, talented people I know. I would love to have, I think he would do amazing in a startup, but I know that he would never want to work for a startup, or it's just not his personality, right? And it's because of the uncertainty, the different types of challenges. You face challenges at big corporations, but completely different types of challenges at
Yeah.
startups, wearing all those different hats. It's just not him. And on the other side of the spectrum is someone like myself. I can never, going into any job from 8 to 5 and not having a feel or a grasp or having firsthand experience of seeing what it is that I'm building and putting it out there in the world myself, um, that would just that would kill me.
Yeah.
And I did work at big corporations in the past. I enjoyed it. It was highly valuable for my experience and my growth. But now that I've tasted what it's like to be at a startup, I don't never say never, but I'd be very surprised if I see myself going back
Yeah.
to that again.
I'd
And
be
it's because
surprised.
of, and this is just, yeah,
I'd be surprised if you went back to that as well, Moody. I mean, it's that
yeah,
to come back to the question I asked at the beginning. It's that willingness to ride the roller coaster, because it's ups, it's downs, and everything in between. Isn't it? It's that willingness to do that, and it's a different mindset, I think. Let me ask you one final question that interests me. When you look back on the journey that you've been on? You know, I mean, you've developed a brilliant bit of technology. You've built a fabulous business. It's growing globally. You know, you've got lots of really great clients. And I mean, when you look back on that journey, what would you say you've learnt? What are the big things that you've learnt from that experience?
Oh wow, that's quite a question, Paul, because so many things rush to my mind at the same time. Um, I think definitely learned the benefits of perseverance
Yeah.
and and just keeping your head down and fighting through all the challenges that are thrown at you. Doing so pragmatically though,
Mm.
it's not just a matter of just working hard and repeating the same thing over again and expecting a different result. It's also learning how to listen to your gut,
Mm.
um, pivot, and surround yourself with equally smart and passionate individuals. How important that is,
Yeah.
right? It's amazing because you see it so often. Not to beat on big corporations, but you go to these big corporations and you see people coasting. You see people that just don't have the passion, and you wonder what would it be like. And at some point, you just lose control of it just because of the sheer size of these companies.
Mm.
But you just wonder what it would be like had you really built and continued to build a team of like-minded individuals that are all driven and all moving, rowing in the same direction and going after and truly believing in the mission. I think you could achieve great things. So just learned and reinforced the importance of the team, and really having a mission that is doing good intrinsically, at its core, it's doing some good.
Yeah. And that
And
really comes across. I
yeah.
mean, that's all. Every time I've spoken to you, that really comes across. If I was to, just one last question. I mean, if you were, if given what you know now, if you were starting again, what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Mm. I would, yeah, I think I would give myself the advice that I give. Well, it's the one that I give to everyone at this point, which is really find a real problem
Mm.
that needs to be solved, right? And that's something that I always see and I've seen over and over again. And sometimes, we could almost fall victim to it. We have to remind ourselves of, hey, what is it that we're trying to solve here? Which is you find people building really amazing technologies, very sexy technologies, and then they go and find a problem that the technology could solve, right? And so really finding the problem and understanding what that problem is by talking to the customers, talking to the people that are going to potentially use the solution, and then developing a solution to solve that problem is absolutely key. And it's something that, we knew going into this and we still didn't get it right.
Mm.
And we still could have done more research. We still could have talked to the customers more, understood their pain points even more. Because seeing where the product is today and which market we're focusing on today versus where we thought we were, there were definitely a lot of learning lessons around that. So yeah, I would say really look for a problem that needs to be solved and really understand that problem and find a solution for it. And it comes down to great listening, being great
Yeah.
listeners. Just
Yeah.
really listen,
And
listen to the people that are suffering from that problem.
yeah, and the thing, one of the things that strikes me when you talk about that is that it must be tremendously rewarding to feel that you're, you know, tackling a problem that really matters. I mean, to come back to the point you made at the beginning about the amount of food that is wasted. I mean, if you can make a dent on that, I mean, that's a tremendous thing to say you've achieved, I think. You know, so and that is and of itself motivating, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Moody,
Yeah.
thank you for taking a bit of time to come and have a chat with us. It's been, I mean, it's very interesting to hear your story. I mean, we've talked about it before, obviously, but it's fascinating to hear it, the way you describe what you're doing. And I mean, a brilliant bit of technology. And I mean, and good luck going forward because it is a tough gig. And you're tackling a big problem, and it's fraught with challenges. So I wish you well with those because we all need a bit of good luck. So, I certainly wish that on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. See you soon, Moody. Bye bye.